you very much indeed, and welcome, Annette.
Thank you so much.
Here we are, and we saw it through to the end. Come on, people, like 15 minutes of brilliant interviewee, and then we can all go get a drink. It's like the happiest words in the English language. This couldn't be more important, Annette. I'm sorry, I haven't properly set you up, and I should, though, to look at some of the reception you've got here. A lot of people seem to know you already around the sector. Co-chair of the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. You've announced that you'll be issuing core carbon principles later and setting new threshold standards. That's the context of why you're here today, and you're a former commissioner of the US SEC. So let's talk about this challenge and why you've gone about it in this particular way. And the word integrity leapt out at me. Of course, I'm a journalist, so I thought, why integrity? Why now?
Well, there's really nothing more important than integrity in this market. I mean, we know today the market is flawed. I mean, my background is as a market regulator, and I look at this market and I see a market that's opaque, that has pricing that certainly doesn't seem to be efficient pricing, where there's a lack of confidence in the market, and so we have decided that to really make this an effective market, you have to start with a market that has integrity. And there are a number of ways that we are going about doing that. I mean, first and foremost, in creating core carbon principles, which are the threshold standard for what a high integrity carbon credit will be. And obviously, if you have standardization of that, it's going to, really catalyze, I would hope, trading in that market. We also need to look at the markets themselves, both the disclosure and the liquidity, liquidity in those markets, the integrity on which those markets transact, and also being able to see those trades and understand what is being done in those markets. And finally, we want to ensure that we can see how those credits are being used. That part of the 3 pillars is not something that our group is doing. The VCMI will be involved in that, but it is terribly important also that the credits be used appropriately by companies.
So tell us a bit more about the core carbon principles and why you're focused on these. My sense is that you're looking for sort of quite clear delineations here. So what is it, to come at it from the other side of it, is like, what is it you're trying to avoid, or what is it you're trying to improve specifically?
Well, when you think of any standardized product, I mean, I come from the securities business, right? So when you trade a share of IBM, you know what you're getting. And here, when you're trading a carbon credit, you want to be sure that it represents a high integrity credit, that there's a certain amount of removal or reduction that is represented in that credit. And today there is no standardization, and so there's a lack of volume in this market, partly because even those who truly want to help in the transition to net zero and who truly want to use carbon offsets as a complementary way to accelerate the transition to net zero, they don't have the confidence to do that because they're not quite sure what they're getting. And so it seems to me that if you really create a sort of a widely accepted standard of high quality credits, that if you build it, they will come. I mean, I think that there will be a lot more interest in trading those products because there'll be more confidence in those products and more standardization around what they are.
There was a predecessor to this, wasn't there, set up, I think, by Mark Carney,
Yes.
And by Bill Winters, the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets. Possibly you went for a slightly snappier title with the Integrity Council. But tell me a bit about what that transition means and what you feel you can build on.
I'd be happy to talk about that because I've been involved in both. You may know I was the operating lead on the task force. It was a mouthful, Task Force for Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets, and now obviously a co-chair of the ICVCM. But I have to say that a lot of what we're doing today is very much born out of the efforts of the task force. The task force was really put together to bring together a huge number of folks from the ecosystem. I mean, we had 450 individuals and over 250 organizations. So we brought everyone under the tent, and we all sort of recognized that we have this, truly important and urgent need to address the climate change issues, and that we wanted to catalyze a process that would address those issues in a way that was complementary to reduction and removals. And to do that, this task force came up with a series of really a blueprint for how one would go about doing this. And a lot of what we're doing now really come directly from that effort. It focused on creating core carbon principles. It focused on having markets of high integrity. Focused on the use of offsets and lots of other things as well. And we're not the only organization involved in this. We are very focused on the first two pillars, as I said, so the CCPs and disclosure and high quality trading markets. But the last piece and other parts of this, such as the disclosure of the use of credits, we're relying on other organizations that we're working very collaboratively with.
And this high integrity proposal also indicates or is based upon information and good access and flow and real-time information. To what extent is that keeping pace with your aspirations?
Well, I think we're working apace. I mean, we're very fortunate with these CCPs. We have 12 scientists who are very expert in the carbon area. They are aware of a number of standards and criteria that are currently used. So they're not starting from a blank piece of paper, but they're building on sort of existing work, and they are using other experts and specialists in various areas as well. And so they are pretty much on track. We're really quite proud of our efforts in being at the point where I believe we'll be ready to go out for a consultation, a proposal that will go out for full notice and comment by all members of the ecosystem, and we'll do that in May, and then take all the comments and carefully consider all the suggestions, and then hopefully by the third quarter of this year, we'll have final product.
What do you see as the biggest challenges here?
Well, there are always challenges, right? I mean, it's certainly staying the course, staying on target in terms of our timelines, because I do think the biggest challenge we have is it's not the politics around everything. It's really just how do we make progress to meaningfully address, the need to to keep to the 1.5 degrees. And so, to me, that's the greatest challenge, and we have to be singularly focused on doing that, but doing it with the highest integrity. Obviously, as a former regulator, I can tell you that anytime you take on something major like this, you're going to get lots of different opinions, and we need to take those all into account. But ultimately, we need to take a stand, resolve, come to a final recommendation and move on.
It was interesting, just as we arrived, and the last speaker was referencing the geopolitical situation. I think probably every speaker or panelist has in some way reflected on it today. To what extent does that play into your thinking about what the next few years looks like?
Well, right now we've really been focused on just, as I said, creating, high integrity markets and focused on the CCPs. Obviously, it's always, we don't work in a vacuum, right? We do have to deal with, and we're existing in a very uncertain world. So it's hard to say what will happen in the short term, because obviously there's a lot of concern about energy and in various jurisdictions. But I would think ultimately, if policymakers really look at this, they see it as an opportunity to really rethink their sort of energy security in their jurisdictions and whether they should be more focused on green solutions.
And you're confident that that will still be the case despite the sort of
well,
the desire to create
I think in the medium to long
solutions.
term it will. I think, you never know about the instant solutions, but, we don't know from one day to the next what we're going to see in the newspaper either. But I'm more confident in the medium and longer term.
Let's look perhaps to a horizon of 8-10 years or so in the voluntary carbon market. What impact could this have? And if we were to be meeting again, what would you be hoping to show me?
Well, what I would really hope for is, that what results is really sort of consistent with our our blueprint, which is that we have, real trading, under these high quality CCPs, that we do have robust markets with, end-to-end transparency and good disclosure, and that we have good disclosures around, and we're seeing some of that even today with the SEC proposals, but disclosures around the use of offsets and the carbon planning of various the larger companies, and that transparency also leads to a really robust market that is truly additional and complementary to other efforts to reach net zero.
It's interesting that when I think we were talking about your team about what are priorities, and monitoring broader supply side integrity efforts also comes on that list. Now that, I have to say, that sounds quite sort of difficult to grasp. To what extent do you think you can meaningfully monitor something so broad?
Right. Well, that is also part, and thank you for raising that. That's also part of our effort. Obviously, I'd like to say that, we're focused on these standards, but you can't just have standards. You have to have a way to monitor that those standards
exactly.
are actually being applied. Otherwise, we have a very nice report that can serve as a, stop to keep a door open or something. So we really do have to join with this an assessment program, and that will be part of what we propose. And obviously it can't be project by project, but certainly project types and methodologies. We will come up with a program for how those will be assessed, and how we will determine which standards or issuers of credits meet those tests. And so that's a very important part of sort of any real regulatory type program. And obviously we don't have regulatory authority here, but we want to come as close as we can to a program that is like that. And so this is a way to, in a sense, to enforce, what we're putting into place. We can certainly take away, someone's ability to, to claim that they're adhering to core carbon
That's really
principles.
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Okay, so what if I fall foul of this?
Right. Well, you have to. We could certainly say that credits that are issued by certain entities no longer qualify. We could do that, and we could. We've also thought about other things. When I was at the SEC, we would call it name and shame. I mean, literally, if people are not adhering to these standards, we could call them out and we could make it public that they're just, these people are, they're claiming that they're adhering to these standards, but they're not. And so, we certainly want to do what we can to make this as enforceable, as real, as tangible, as high integrity as possible. So we're thinking about all means of achieving that.
I noticed Alok Sharma was saying he was pleased that the government here in the UK is supporting the VCMI initiative. How much buy-in are you getting from other governments, and how's that looking?
We haven't gotten a lot of government support. We have a lot of philanthropy, private sector support. Always want more.
It's important that the governments are, at least whether they want to put their name to it in the way that Alok Sharma has done in his role around COP26. But isn't it important that it does, even if it is not going to have the government regulatory stamp, the governments are aware of it as part of the package?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you raised that, because it is very important that we're adjacent, right, to a lot of these government efforts, and we would like to be as helpful and contributory as possible. And so I think having governments be aware of what we're doing, love to have their support, but not essential. But I like to think of what we're doing also as being in many ways consistent with sort of what a traditional regulatory regime would look like, so that if in the future someone wants to put me out of this business and the governments want to take it on, they will easily be able to do that because it's consistent with the principles that they adopt in their regimes. And so our purpose here was not to create something completely newfangled, for lack of a better word. we're borrowing from, there are a lot of existing regulatory principles that we're borrowing from. And we have talked to people at IOSCO, and I've had several discussions with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And we're happy to talk to any regulators or government authorities who would like to know more about this, because we would love their support, but we also want to be sort of consistent with their efforts.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Let's hope we get you back before 10 years to see how it's going. Just before we break up, I think we're just on a personal note. I should offer condolences because you lost your co-chairman at the weekend. You see,
Yes,
just
thank you for raising that. It's
brief word.
an extraordinary loss. Hugh Seeley was my co-chair, and he died very unexpectedly on Friday evening. And still really coming to terms with it. He was just such a wonderful contributor to our efforts. He was certainly my partner in every way in this. Much of what we've accomplished so far, I credit Hugh with. And, he was a giant in the environmental field. He was a brilliant and wise man, but also a very genuine one and very witty, and just a total pleasure to work with. So, I'd like to think that the Integrity Council, we're obviously going to redouble our efforts, but that our efforts will all be in his honor.
It's a great legacy.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed, Annette, for joining us and concluding our day. Your heads must be ringing with so much good information and debate. We hope you've enjoyed it and that you'll feed back to us about anything you'd liked and anything you'd like us to take away as well. Thank you to all the speakers and, of course, for you. And indeed, anyone who's here at the end gets a particular gold star. We're going to go for a drink in the Galleria and hope that you'll come and join us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.